Hey you guys, welcome to my channel. So, did you guys even know that there was a movie adaptation of this? Because I sure didn't. Let's discuss. So I was actually first turned on to Anne Rivers Siddons' 1978 novel, The House Next Door, actually through Stephen King's sort of seminal nonfiction book, Danse Macabre, which I think came out in 1981 or thereabouts. So he actually picked The House Next Door as one of his 10 sort of like iconic modern horror novels, modern at least up until 1980, and he actually wrote a whole entire chapter about it, kind of talking about its themes and its plot and everything like that. So I've read this novel multiple times, but I actually wasn't aware until quite recently that Lifetime had made a film adaptation of it back in 2006. When I first heard that Lifetime had made it, I admit that this did make me cringe a little bit. Specifically because this was made for Lifetime, which I always, perhaps erroneously, because I'm not an expert, I kind of always thought of Lifetime as like the shoe-buying, chocolate-scarfing menstrual cycle of TV networks, right? So I was actually expecting this adaptation to be a lot more cheeseball than it eventually turned out. Particularly because the source novel, if you don't know, is kind of like a Southern Gothic, like a modern Southern Gothic, and it has so much like sordid, over-the-top stuff going on in the plot, albeit presented in a sort of toned down kind of way, and I kind of felt like the Lifetime movie would maybe lean into that a tad, but I'm kind of glad that that didn't happen. So the movie, starring Lara Flynn Boyle and her surgically unfortunate upper lip, I hate to say, yeah, so, she was a beautiful girl before, and it's like, I guess, I don't know, somebody did something with the surgery in around 2006. So she plays Cole Kennedy, who's like the main character. Zach from Saved by the Bell plays Kim the architect. And there's a few other familiar faces in the cast as well. And as I said, this movie is actually, considering the source material, is actually relatively restrained. So that was kind of nice to see, and I didn't really expect it. I mean, the book pretty handily pulled off its sort of like ridiculously melodramatic incidents because of Anne Rivers Siddons' her sort of like just matter-of-fact prose and the sort of stately pacing of it. So I just kind of feel like, some of the stuff that works in the book, I feel like it probably wouldn't have worked in the movie. Like it would have shaded over into camp, maybe. So it does seem like whoever wrote the screenplay for the adaptation of this knew enough to sort of like rein it in a little bit just to make it play better on screen and like make it seem more believable. I will say in the book I did enjoy like the over the top, because it's a Southern Gothic, and in a book you can kind of get away with a lot more stuff than you can get away with in a movie because people aren't like seeing it in front of their face. So, in the book it seemed a little over the top, but not anything out of the bounds of the genre, whereas in a movie I think it would have just seemed like ridiculous. So they did kind of like tone it down for the movie, which I thought was a good choice. So the story has been modernized, obviously, reflecting the 28 years between the book and the movie. So the suburb in the movie is basically just presented as sort of like generic yuppie enclave. The more specific Old South versus New South kind of theme of the book, which is actually set in a fancy suburb of Atlanta, are not really here anymore, which, like I said, it's not a huge deal because that was like a very specific time and place, and obviously we've moved on from that, so they decided to just kind of change it and make it sort of like a wealthy suburb. I feel like the main protagonist of Cole Kennedy, who is actually in the movie, she's never referred to by her full book name, which is Colquitt. She is called Cole sometimes, like as a nickname, but her name is actually Colquitt, and she does get called that like several times. And like when first time I read this book, I'm like, what the fuck kind of name is that? It was like, no offense if you do have that name, but I've literally never heard of anybody else named that. So I just thought it was like really weird. So in the movie, she seems like she's a little bit younger than in the book, which, pretty standard issue, I guess. And her husband, Walker, in the movie, also younger. Now, he was actually in the book, he was named Walter, but I guess maybe whoever was the screenwriter was just kind of like, maybe that sounds like an old-fashioned name, so okay. So as I said, they seem to make them both younger, but that seems to be pretty par for the course for movie adaptations, make them younger, hotter, whatever. So they did that. So I will say that this was actually probably after, once I saw it, this actually didn't get very good reviews. Like when it came out, I think it's only standing at like 27% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I didn't mind it actually. I guess maybe because I was expecting it to be a lot worse than it was, so maybe like my expectations were lowered, but this actually wasn't really all that bad. And to be honest, I think this is actually, in hindsight, was probably like a really good choice for a Lifetime movie because the characters in the book are just very like shallow and backbiting and class conscious, and so I think that like makes for a really good like juicy kind of drama for this type of movie. So in a matter of fact, I'm gonna say that some of the characters in the movie were actually more likable than the ones in the book, which was kind of crazy. So the plot actually follows the novels pretty closely. So if you haven't read the book, I'm gonna spoil it for you pretty much. So go read it real quick and then come back. It's not really all that long, probably only this paperback here is about 277 pages. So just go read it and then come back and then we'll talk about it, okay? I'll wait. Done? Okay, moving on. So The House Next Door is basically a frame story with the Kennedys watching sort of like a succession of three families moving into this gorgeous newly built house next door and slowly coming to the realization that the house is evil and destroys everyone who lives within it and kind of just comes in contact with it by essentially pinpointing what the residents value or fear the most, and then kind of dismantling their lives in the most spectacular ways possible. So the movie is only about 90 minutes long, so obviously the plot had to be substantially sort of compressed, with some incidents being combined or kind of one horrific event coming quickly on the heels of the last one. So because of this, characterization suffers a bit, as it would. And to someone who's read the book like me, it will seem like events are happening like at a lightning pace, like shit's happening like really, really quickly. But that kind of happens to me every time that I go see a movie that's based on a book. I'm like, oh my God, this is happening already. So that's more a failure of the medium than this movie in particular. So I'm not gonna fault this particular movie for that. It seems like they did pretty much okay within the time constraints that they had. So the novel is told entirely from Cole's point of view. But in spite of this, she actually kind of remains on the periphery of the action for a good part of the book. She mostly hears about events like happening at the house next door kind of secondhand, and she doesn't really witness anything herself, like firsthand, until pretty late into the story. In the movie, though, Cole is the main character, like the focal point, so the kind of outsider status a little bit that she had in the book wouldn't really have worked with what they wanted to do with the movie. But I will say, I think the screenwriter came up with a pretty elegant, decent solution in that in the book, also, she's an interior decorator. So they made her an interior decorator in the movie as well. So basically what they had her do was that every time a new family would move into the house next door, they would hire her to decorate the house. So she would be inside the house, and it got her like more directly involved in the shenanigans without them having to like change too much of the thing about her character. So I thought that was a good idea, like a very believable approach, and got her more directly involved in the plot so she could see more things firsthand. So just as in the book, there's kind of this, at the beginning, there's like this short flash forward introduction where Cole and Walker are shown like leaving copies of their wills conspicuously at their house, which is pretty good opening because everybody's like, what the fuck's going on here? So they leave the wills at their house and then they head over to the house next door. And there's kind of like a voiceover with Cole explaining, we know what we're going to do is terrible, but that it won't matter because we probably won't be alive long enough to get in trouble for what we're about to do. So that's kind of like the little prologue that's sort of like setting up, getting everybody sort of sucked in. Then we do a flashback. We cut to 18 months earlier. And this is when Cole, Walker, and all the other neighbors, like in this little enclave, kind of start expressing their understandable displeasure that a house is finally being built on this beautiful wooded lot next to the Kennedys' house. Now, everybody had believed, including the Kennedys when they bought the house, that this lot was so weirdly shaped, like it was very hilly with all these trees and stuff, that no one would ever build a house on it because it would be such a pain in the ass. So, you know, for a long time, for as long as Cole and Walker have lived here, they're really, really happy because they can just look out the window and it's this nice, like, there's all these trees and hills, like, right next to their house, and they're secure in the knowledge that no one will build a house on it. But now someone is building a house on it, so they're all, like, pretty upset about it. But when they meet the hotshit architect, whose name is Kim, and he's kind of like a tormented genius kind of guy, and I know I kind of, like... So, you know, I kind of like denigrated him a little bit by saying, "Oh, it's Zach from Saved by the Bell." It is. It's Mark Paul Gosselaar, or however you pronounce his last name. But he is actually shockingly well cast in this. He's actually like really, really good. So once they meet him and see his plans for it, and he has like these genius plans how he's gonna like incorporate the nature the way it is like into the design of the house. Like he wants it to look very organic, like it's sprouted out of the ground and stuff like that. So once they see that, once they meet him, he's a very nice man. So a lot of them kind of have a little bit of a change of heart a little bit. And at the same time, they also meet the young couple that's going to be moving into the house that hired Kim to build it for them. And this is a couple named Pye and Buddy Harrelson. She's named, I can't remember what her real name is in the book, but she's named Pye because I guess her dad called her like Pumpkin Pie or something like that. So everybody just calls her Pye. I don't even remember what her real name is. So the Harrelson family section of the movie was the most different from the novel. But I'm going to say I think most of the changes they made were probably the right ones, though I'll elaborate a little bit more on that in a bit. In the book, Pye was a really young, very naive. She was kind of like a perky cheerleader type. She also had this weird, bizarre, like almost quasi-sexual relationship / competition thing going on with her dad. It was a little bit weird. And I think even one of the characters in the book like comments on it, like that weird thing she has like with her dad. I don't think they were actually like humping or anything like that, but there was just like a weird, like a sexual tension like between them, you know what I mean? So it was that. So her dad's like super, super conservative, super old fashioned. So in the movie, they kind of get rid of like that little creepy vibe a little bit. They are kind of like competitive with each other and sort of like spiteful about one another, but they kind of like got rid of the weird sexual vibe. Pye tells Cole at one point in the movie that she's basically basing her entire life around showing her father up. Mostly for spite, because she feels like it's kind of like a playful spite, if that makes any sense. But she's like, well, you know, my daddy was always like getting on me because it's like she doesn't think my husband is good enough. She doesn't think my life is good enough. Nothing's good enough. So she's always just kind of like trying to show him up like that, you know, that she's going to be like really awesome and everything like that. Movie Pye is a lot less annoying than book Pye. I will say that. Because book Pye was actually like really... I don't know. I'm not really sure like what the word I would use, but yeah, she's very, very unlikable. Even though she's like very young and naive, she's really unlikable. So I thought it was like a good decision to like soften her up a little bit and make her a little bit more sympathetic. Portraying her on screen the same way that she was in the book probably would have made her seem, again, like less sympathetic and also like less realistic. Because like I said, the novel was published in the late 1970s, and a lot of things culturally have changed since then in the South and elsewhere. So I don't know if it would have like played the same if you'd done that in a movie. It would have seemed like weird and like off-putting and like old-fashioned. So I'm glad that they changed that. So just as in the book, Pye is happily pregnant and is pretty much unable to believe her luck at how her life is progressing. Oh my God, everything's going so awesome. I'm just like showing daddy that I'm just like the best and he's going to be proud of me and all this other kind of stuff. Also in the book, Buddy buys her husband, Buddy, buys her this adorable puppy that you just know from the jump that something terrible is going to happen to. Especially as there's a scene earlier where Cole finds a torn up animal in her garden. I don't remember if she even recognized what kind of animal it is. So shortly afterward, animal cruelty alert, the puppy is found ripped to pieces. R.I.P. puppy. God damn it, movies. Will you please leave little kitties and puppies alone? They never do, though. But and I'm just you blame the book for this one because this did happen in the book as well. Now, obviously, Pi is heartbroken at the death of the puppy. She was planning on having a housewarming party, and she decides she's gonna go ahead with it so she can, like, schmooze with her new neighbors and show her daddy how high up the social ladder that she's climbed, so daddy will be proud of her. Right here, though, is where the movie kind of parts ways with the book pretty significantly, at least as far as this, section of the book is concerned. In the movie, pretty much everything bad that happens to the Harrelsons sort of comes crashing down all at once. Like, the party seems to be going really well, but then, like, partway through, Pi can't find Buddy, and she goes through the house, like, to look for him. She's standing at the top of the basement stairs, and then Buddy comes and, like, pushes her to the bottom. Like, something in the house is, like, possessed him, because, like I said, the house is evil. So Cole finds her, kind of rallies the troops. Pi gets carried off in an ambulance, and naturally ends up having a miscarriage. Buddy gets carted off in handcuffs and charged with attempted murder. Pi's dad pretty much screams at him that I always knew you were a piece of shit. And that's pretty much the end of the Harrelsons. Like, they move out subsequently. In the book, however, the events had a much darker and a little more batshit quality to them. Like I said, it was kind of like way more out there than what happened in the movie. Now, Pi does actually fall down the stairs and lose her baby at one point in the book, but it happens kind of like earlier in the story, and I'm pretty sure she's alone in the house when it happens, like Buddy is at work or something. So she gets found by one of her neighbors, I think it's Virginia Guthrie, and Cole gets, like, summoned over there to help out. Now, she does have a miscarriage. Now, but despite this, because the puppy died, like, earlier on, and then, it's like ramping up, like, slowly. So in spite of the miscarriage, which she's very upset about, obviously, but she decides she's going to go on with the party anyway, since kind of displaying her status to daddy is, like, the most important thing in the world to her. Now, at the party, again, she loses track of Buddy, but he doesn't push her down the stairs. What happens instead is that she's looking around the house, and she opens the door of the bedroom where everybody's, like, been putting their coats, like, on the bed, and she finds her husband fucking his male law partner, like his partner at the law firm. So they're, like, having some, like, real ass slapping, like, gay sex in there. And so she not only sees that, like, both of them, like, naked and rutting, like, on top of the coats, but she also sees that her dad had opened the door and found them first and seen them fucking, and he either has a stroke or a heart attack, and he pretty much, like, dies on the bedroom floor. So there's that. So like I said, it's a lot crazier than what happens in the movie. Now, obviously, I can see why the movie kind of chose to downplay the novel's scenario. I mean, public infidelity aside, gay sex is not really anything that's shocking or immoral to pretty much anyone anymore, other than maybe some backwards knuckle draggers somewhere. So the scene doesn't really play out the same in 2006 as it would have back in 1978. And again, I kind of feel like maybe the screenwriter thought, this is maybe, like, way too over the top. It just might be too much for people to swallow, or it might go so far over that it becomes absurd or funny. So they decided they were going to, like, rein it in, though. I have to say, though, there could have been a different way to do this, though, because I do have one caveat. Because in the book and in the movie, pretty much, although it's less evident, in the book, the whole MO of the house is that it very systematically takes away everything that is most important to the people who live there or who come in close contact with it. So in the book, it's very, very specific in how it chooses to destroy the Harrelsons. It took their puppy first, then it took Pi's baby, then it kind of shit all over Buddy's professional reputation by involving him in this really scandalous, like, sex thing with his law partner, which everyone at the party saw. Then it not only had Pi's dad see Buddy in such a compromising position, but it killed Dad off too, thereby leaving Pi just with her life in complete shambles, like she doesn't have anything left. So while I can see that why the movie went the direction it did, like I said, softening it a little bit, that's kind of was my complaint, that it did soften the blow. I mean, the house in the book took everything away from her. It left her with nothing. But in the movie, like, her dad didn't die, so it kind of left her that one thing to, I don't know, it's maybe that's where maybe now the dad's alive and he knows that the husband was a murderer and all this, or had caused the death of the baby or whatever. So I don't know, maybe it's not as bad, but like I said, it did seem to soften the blow somewhat by like not killing her dad off. So there's that. So anyway, as in the book, after the Harrelsons take off, like move out, a new couple comes in called the Sheehans, Anita and Buck. Now, Buck seems pretty similar to how he did in the book, but the character of Anita is like completely different, and I'm not entirely sure why they changed her so drastically. In the book, Anita was like this real delicate, like dark-haired, beautiful, like this almost like waif-like, fragile, like one of those kind of women, like this almost kind of like not even there. She's very like whispery and that kind of thing. But she was sort of like a tragic heroine. She was like haunted by something in her past, which you don't find out what it is till later. But she's still like pretty eager to make friends in the neighborhood, even though it's very clear that she's in a very fragile mental state. So over the course of the book, you do find out like what her deal is. We find out that the Sheehan's son, Toby, was killed in a helicopter crash in Vietnam, and Anita had to be institutionalized to deal with the grief afterwards. Now, Buck, who was unable to deal with what happened, not only his son dying, but then his wife being carted off to the mental asylum, had an affair. Anita found out about it. So, which didn't help her mental state any, obviously. Now, the couple have been through counseling and have reconciled and seem like they're getting their shit together. So Anita kind of got to a better mental place. Buck had sort of like made his amends for the whole thing and was recommitted to their marriage and all of this. And so they moved into this house as kind of like a fresh start. We're going to start over, start our life anew or whatever. Now, in the movie, as I said, Anita was not really this kind of like tragic, dark-haired beauty. In the movie, she was just kind of like this average-looking, matronly type woman with this sort of like short mom hair. And she didn't really have anything particularly mysterious or ethereal about her or anything like that. As I said, maybe they were trying to make her more relatable or more realistic or something like that, because she seemed very much like a Southern Gothic type of character, like in the book, I guess. But she doesn't really seem like I said, she didn't seem spooky or mentally fragile or anything. She seemed like pretty open, pretty friendly. Cole and a couple of the other neighbor ladies show up with flowers and cake, like when they move in, like, hey, welcome to the neighborhood. But pretty soon after that, pretty immediately, matter of fact, things start going to shit. Anita, or, when the ladies come over, like the welcoming committee, she orders a pizza for everybody. And when the pizza guy comes to the door, she freaks out, thinking that it's her dead son, who in this movie was actually killed in Iraq rather than Vietnam, obviously, because they've updated it. So she thinks the pizza guy is her dead son, like standing on the doorstep. And she starts like wigging out. Now, just as in the book, she starts getting like mysterious phone calls where she thinks that she hears her son Toby calling to her. And she eventually starts to see the helicopter accident that killed him playing on the TV in the living room. Unlike in the book, Cole is actually a witness to one of these incidents where the helicopter crash is shown on TV. In the book, she doesn't see it. She just hears about it secondhand. Now, as I said, the plot had to be substantially speeded up due to time constraints, but I gotta say it's still pretty jarring that Anita basically like moved to the neighborhood. Everybody's like, welcome to the neighborhood. And then she opens the door and she's like, blah, my dead son. You know what I mean? So she flipped out like really, really quick. And like I said, I know they didn't have a lot of time. But over the book, it was like a much, much slower progression because yes, she was in a fragile mental state when she first got there, but she seemed like, there was time for her to kind of like get acclimated and like start making friends and stuff like that. And then very, very slowly she started, having these weird phone calls and seeing the guy on the thing, and stuff like that. So it happened like much slower. And in the book, this was the point where Cole had only started to suspect that maybe something was wrong with the house. As I mentioned, Cole in the book didn't see the helicopter crash on the TV. Buck told her about it. And then, like, she checked the TV listings and she didn't see anything in the TV listings that would have accounted for anything like having a helicopter crash in it. And so she was kind of like wondering, maybe something kind of weird is going on over there. You know what I mean? So the rest of the movie Sheehan's arc plays out pretty similarly to how the book does. Anita keeps seeing visions of Toby. She completely loses her marbles. Then Buck, again, gets involved sexually with one of the other neighbors, Virginia, and Anita catches them, like, in the act. Anita ends up killing herself. Buck moves away, and Virginia also has to, like, move away from the neighborhood because of the shame, because the house, like, made her, like, do this. Part 3, with the third family, the Greenes, is also fairly similar. So Norman Greene, the dad, is this sort of, like, self-important, like, tight-ass, abusive asshole with OCD issues. His wife, Susan, who is kind of like just this cowed, mousy woman, she sort of vainly tries to be perfect for him and trying to, like, keep up this sort of pleasant social face. And they have a daughter named Belinda, who was actually named Melissa in the book, so I don't know why they changed it. But their daughter suffers from some sort of, like, unspecified illness that kind of causes her to have stomach aches and vomit at times that are inconvenient for her jackwad father. Again, it's like IBS or something like that. I'm not really sure. It's like some kind of stomach issues. In the book, I will note, Norman is her stepfather, and the girl's kind of gastrointestinal disease is a source of, like, a lot of embarrassment for him. So much so that he denies that she even has it. He just says, oh, she's just saying that she has that, like, she's trying to get attention. This is touched on a little bit in the movie, but it's not. But one thing that's interesting, I don't think in the movie that they ever state that Belinda is anything other than Norman's biological daughter. But in the book, it's pretty clear that she's the stepdaughter. So just like in the book, the Greenes have a party which not that many people attend because the invitations, mysteriously, never get mailed out, even though Susan, the wife, is shown getting ready to mail them. So also, as in the book, Susan is blamed for her quote-unquote stupidity in not getting the invitations out, even though she's quite sure she did. Like I said, the house is supernatural and it's, like, doing shit. The house basically made the invitations not show up, is the implication, because that's what the house does. It's very insidious in that way. So the few people that do turn up at the party, Norman kind of, like, tries to make the most of it, even though it's very awkward because none of these people particularly like Norman all that much and didn't really want to go to the party because they think he's a douche. But, you know, they kind of thought they should just for the wife and the kid's sake, you know, and to kind of welcome to the neighborhood and whatever. So he's at the party. He starts, like, lecturing and pontificating at length to all of these people that are stuck at this party about how awesome he is and about how put upon he feels at how burdened he is with his subpar family. They're all useless and everything like that. Now, in the movie, the party kind of comes to a screeching halt when Belinda, like, comes down and basically pees herself in front of the party guests, which I'm guessing they probably got that idea from The Exorcist, you know, where Reagan comes downstairs and pees and says to the astronaut, you're going to die up there. So it's kind of like that, like, similar. That's at least what it made me think of. So her dad is obviously flipped out by this because, like I said, he has OCD and he's just like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And it's embarrassing and dirty and blah, blah, blah. So this scene, I will say, is very substantially toned down from what happened in the book. That's probably for the best, though, because it would have been pretty gross to, like, put what was in the book in the movie. So in the book, everybody at the party is kind of alerted by the scream coming from the kitchen. So they all run to the kitchen to see what the problem is, and they find the daughter, Melissa, and she's, like, cramped up in a fetal position on the floor, pretty much just, like, spraying diarrhea all over her white dress, the floor, her mom, just everywhere. There's just, like, diarrhea everywhere. It's, like, super disgusting. Because her dad, like, kept denying, oh, she doesn't have anything wrong with her, and wouldn't allow the mom to take her to a doctor or anything like that. And so she was the kid had basically become so afraid of, like, going to the bathroom, even if she had to go, that she was always kind of, like, clenching and, like, keeping everything inside, so everything just, like, busted out of her at once. I know that's gross, but that's essentially what happens. If I recall correctly, the whole kind of, like, capper on the evening in the book is the power going out which, you know, again, another thing ruining the perfect party that Norman had planned. And then it comes on exactly at the moment when Norman is standing over the blender, which Susan had left the top off of. So when the power comes back on, like, all the stuff out of the blender, like, comes in, like, splashes all over his face, obviously, like, making him dirty, embarrassing him, which are, like, his least favorite things in the whole entire world, and everybody sees it. So obviously it's happened in front of everybody, and he just can't fucking take it. Now, in the book, he furiously, like, runs everyone out of the party, and it comes to light that later on, after everybody left, there was this horrible argument between Norman and Susan finally, probably justifiably so, I mean, she just was like, fuck this shit, she flipped out and shot him, and then she shot her daughter, and then she shot herself, so all of them are dead. Now, in the movie, they tone this down some as well. Susan does actually end up shooting Norman and herself, but the daughter, Belinda, escapes and actually ends up going to Colin Walker Kennedy's house for help. So I guess Lifetime didn't really want to kill off the cute little girl. Killed the puppy, though, but didn't want to kill the cute little girl. I mean, you know, I can see that. But in the book, she died. So the rest of the movie plays out pretty much the same way as it does in the book. The architect, Kim, he had gone off to Italy because it seemed like after he built this particular house, like, he was having a hard time coming up with any new designs anymore. It's almost like all his creativity was drained, like all his, passion for architecture was drained. So he was trying to get his mojo back, like, in Italy. So when he comes back, I mean, obviously now the Greenes are all dead. So he's like, well, he buys back his own house that he designed. Him and Cole are in the house alone at one point. And as I said, the house is insidious and it makes people inside it, like, do particular things. Almost like it's possessing them. It's not really anything like demons or anything like that. It's almost just like this house has some kind of energy to it that, like, makes you do terrible things when you're in it, or makes terrible things happen, like, when you're inside of it. So Cole and Kim are inside the house, and they had been sort of, like, friendly earlier and, like, kind of like light flirtation and blah, 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 like at the beginning of the book. But the house basically makes them, like, jump on each other and, like, start humping each other. And Walker, Cole's husband, like, comes, or Walter, but like I said, it's so confusing, Walter, you know, the same says Walt, we'll call him that, or whatever. So he comes in, he sees them fucking, and attempts to kill both of them, but everybody manages to, like, escape unscathed. They have to, like, drag themselves out of the house, like, to get themselves, like, out of the sphere of influence. So just as in the book, this particular event finally shows Walter/Walker how serious this is, that the house is actually evil, because he hadn't really believed it up till now. He hadn't really seen it in action. Like, yeah, all this shit happening was weird, but you don't really think, oh, the house is, like, evil or supernatural or anything like that. But this particular thing, like, actually made him realize, holy shit, this house is evil. We need to do something about it. We need to destroy it. So that's when he kind of finally came to his wife's side and said, yeah, we need to, like, pair up and fucking get rid of this thing. Now, in the book, Cole and Walter actually went to the press to warn people about the house. And subsequently, the entire neighborhood, like, turned against them and shunned them for, like, they're like, what the fuck kind of stupid story is that? We're dealing with all this, like, traumatic shit that happened in the neighborhood, and you're out there in the press, like, talking about fucking cursed house. Fuck you guys. So, yeah, so they basically they were given, like, pariah status, right? Now, in the movie, they don't ever go to the press, which is kind of a significant change. Maybe they just didn't want to go that route because, you know, like I said, it just seemed like they had to cut out a lot of stuff for time. The neighbors still see them as, like, kind of pariahs, though, just because of, like, the way they talk about the house. In the movie, they destroy the house by blowing it up, which I think is pretty much the same thing that they did in the book, and making it look like an accident. Now, Kim is killed in the explosion. I can't remember. I think in the book, they're pretty sure that they want to kill him and make it look like it's like they kill him on purpose because they figured out that whatever curse the house has came from him, and that any house that he builds in the future is gonna do the same thing. I'm not really I don't remember entirely how they figured that out, but they did figure it out. So they said, well, we have to wipe him out and the house as well. The movie, I'm not sure if they thought, if, like, they blew the house up and then Kim just happened to be in there, or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of left unclear. But Kim gets killed in both the book and the movie. So similar to the book, the movie also ends with Pie and Buddy's contractor from the beginning of the movie. They were the first couple, remember, talking to this sort of like idealistic new couple. He's like, hey, I've got these amazing house plans that I still have from this hot shit architect who just died, unfortunately, but I can build this house for you if you want it. And the couple are like enchanted because they said, oh, it looks alive and it looks magical. And yes, of course, we would like this beautiful house. And so, of course, because it was Kim that designed it, these plans, like whoever builds a house from these plans, that house is going to do the same thing. So the cycle of evil will continue. Now, I do think that the movie was a lot less subtle in kind of the portrayal of Kim as a definite agent of the evil. The movie kind of almost made him seem like a willing participant, like it was something, kind of, you know what I mean? Where he kind of knew that he had it, and he was just kind of like, well, he wasn't like a mustache twirling villain or anything, but he seemed to be aware of it. In the book, as I said, it is understood that there's some kind of curse of some kind that causes everything that he designs to sort of cause like death and misery, but he doesn't seem as complicit in the evil, I guess. Like, maybe he seemed more to me in the book like more of like an innocent conduit, like he wasn't really that aware of it. I could have been misreading the text, the book on that score. I'm not entirely sure, but that didn't really come through clear to me that he knew about or he was doing it on purpose. It just seemed like he was just a random guy, and this curse, whatever it was, like was working through him, and he didn't really have much of anything to do with it. So just like in the book, Cole and Walter eventually end up leaving the house, leaving the neighborhood, and they move permanently to their beach house, which must be nice, you know. These upper middle class people with their several houses that they can just move around to. But yeah, so basically they go there to sort of get away from their neighbors who, as I said, are still all sneering at them. In the book, they all have all the press of like the media and everything like that. So they want to get away from that as well. In the movie, they don't do that, but same kind of thing. Unlike the book, though, they end up adopting the Greene's daughter, because remember, she lived in the movie. In the book, she's dead, so it's like a moot point. But they tied up in the movie. They kind of, and I think in the book they brought this up a couple times too. But Cole and Walker were kind of like upset that I don't know if they're upset, but Cole was maybe like ambivalent, like maybe they wanted a kid or something like that. So they seemed kind of like bothered that they were childless, not like overtly, but there was that. So I think they added more like hints of that in the movie, so that when they adopted Belinda, it would be like, oh, we have a kid now and we live in the beach house and everything like that. So as I said, really not a bad adaptation at all. Not fantastic. I'm sure that if you had like a bigger budget and like, more, I don't know, like a bigger director or something like that, like somebody could really make something cool out of this. But for a Lifetime movie, this was actually pretty damn good. Like one of the better Lifetime movies that I've seen. Not that I've seen a great deal of them. I mean, it never got like so silly that I was like rolling my eyes or anything, and it moved along at a pretty good pace. Sometimes it was like went a little too fast, but I think maybe that's just because I had read the book, so I was just kind of like, holy shit, this is happening already, whatever. I mean, some of the changes that they made from the book I agreed with, some of them I didn't agree with so much. But I think pretty much every change that was made, I understood why it was made. Like, even if I didn't particularly like it, I was just kind of like, well, yeah, maybe I would have changed it differently, but I can see why you changed it. You know what I mean? There was nothing in there that was just like, what the fuck? Why did you do that? Or anything like that. Not really. So, if you're bored one day and have 90 minutes to kill, then it's definitely worth checking out. Although, obviously, the book is way better and would probably be a better investment of your time. But if you're curious and have read the book and just are curious to see what a Lifetime movie adaptation of it would be like, then I didn't think it was a waste of time. I actually enjoyed it. It's pretty decent. And, I'm not sure where you can get it. I actually watched it on YouTube. I'm not entirely sure if it's on there anymore because I'm not sure what the, copyright issues with it are. But as I said, not too bad at all for an adaptation. That'll do it for this particular discussion. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.